Our next speaker is Alan Barnes. Alan's from Collen Construction and is currently Ireland's Construction Manager of the Year for 2019. His award comes as a result of his work on the Scots Church in Lower Abbey Street, Dublin. Received a gold medal at the Chartered Institute of Build and Construction Manager of the Year Awards dinner at Croke Park Stadium last year. The CMYA in Ireland is recognised as achievement of those leading complex and challenging projects. CMYA is a prestigious honour within the industry and one that's much coveted for its recognition of the excellence and exceptional skills of the recipients. The project that led to Alan's nomination and gold medal win was the conservation and refurbishment of the existing Scots Presbyterian Church, a protected structure on Abbey Street. The work involved the erection of a complex 7-storey eco-skeleton steel frame around the existing church, providing state-of-the-art office accommodation as part of the planned expansion of office headquarters for the church in Lower Abbey Street. The risks and challenges encountered on this project required ingenuity, dedication and great construction management skills, delivered in an extremely tight budget and tight time frame. So I now ask Alan to give his overview of this complex and challenging project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Martin, for your very generous introduction there, and thanks everybody for hanging around to listen to me presentation. I'm here obviously today just to talk about the building that's behind me, Scots Presbyterian Church. Just a couple of things to point out about it before I start is it's 3 buildings. There's the church on the left, which is the main church building, and then inside the glass building there's another, it's called a church hall, and then obviously the new building that came around that building. Just before I start, I guess I just want to give you a bit of brief background on my own career journey to get to this point. I graduated from Bolton Street. I studied construction technology in 2002. I graduated from Bolton Street and completed my degree in the University of South Wales in Cardiff in 2003. After that, I started into the industry as a site engineer. I worked for Crampton's for a number of years in Dublin. Spent a couple of years travelling. I worked in Canada as an engineer in the construction industry as well in 2004, 2005, before coming home and starting to work for Collen, who I still work for today. So when I started working for Collen in 2007, it was as a site engineer, and I progressed through the ranks with Collen from engineer to site manager to where I am today as project manager, which kind of brings us up to date to where we are in 2016. The building behind me was about to get going. So what I have here is just a slideshow. There's a couple of videos in it, lots of glossy pictures for everybody for after lunch to look at. The building, when we took it over in 2016, it was effectively a church. You know, as you would see a number of buildings around any city, around Galway, around Dublin, it was highly kind of carbonated. It was unused for about 20 years. The client, the VHI, bought it. Their head office was next door to it, but they didn't know what to do with it at the time, so they just bought the building so as it wouldn't be redeveloped by somebody else. And that's the state that we had found the building in. It was originally designed by an architect from Limerick called William Fogarty, and it was the first foundation stone was laid in 1868. So it was almost 150 years later when we came and took it over. The project, just particulars, obviously the client is the VHI. Everybody's heard of the VHI. Their headquarters is based on Abbey Street in Dublin. The architects are the same architects that did, if anybody was familiar with the Borgosh Energy Theatre in Grand Canal in Dublin, Colley's A. O'Connell. And they also designed the Marker Hotel, which is on Grand Canal in Dublin also. The engineers are Casey O'Rourke. The contractor is who I work for, Collen Construction. The duration was just under 2 years and the cost was to be 18 million euros. Project scope was the enlargement of the VHI offices. So VHI office is just this building here next door. That's their head office. The restoration of the Presbyterian Church and the church hall, which is the building within the building. The construction then of the contemporary diagrid structure up and above the other church hall, and then the creation of a glazed ground floor link between the existing church building. So effectively this picture would have been taken maybe a week after we got the site. You see, this is the church hall building where the exoskeleton building is about to be built over. This is the main church, which was then finally turned into their reception, and we ended up demolishing part of this building and creating a link building at a number of different levels into their offices to give a continuous flow from one building to the other. Key challenges for me from buildability perspective and a construction perspective, there was a number of challenges. The image that you see on the right here was taken out of the tower crane, so we only had a single tower crane on it, which in the city centre location, everything is about the tower crane. Everything comes in, has to be lifted, and everything has to be taken down. So it's all about a tower crane, and if you only have one, that gives you constraints straight away. This small little yard here was where the entire project was built from. This building belongs to the VHI as well, and they were kind enough to give us that yard as our laydown areas. So that is where everything was brought in and out of prior to being lifted into location by the crane. The building was hemmed in on three sides, the building site, by this building on one side, the Lewis on the other side, and the Abbey Theatre on the third side. So all our deliveries had to come up and down this one-way street and be offloaded in here and then lifted up into position by the tower crane. So I've just noted off a couple of key challenges there. As it says, the city centre location, health and safety, massive challenge. Biggest challenge on the project was the health and safety, not only for the construction workers, but obviously for the surrounding buildings and for people, pedestrians and civilians that would be in the area. Conservation of a 150-year-old building is a challenge enough without everything else on top of it. Access and storage, as I just said, access, for workers getting to the work area, and also access to store materials prior to being put into position. Steel frame and the facade interface, so there was massive engineering coordination that required from that, and then there was some finishes inside the exposed concrete coffered ceilings. So logistics, communications, and the surrounding buildings, as I said already, one of the biggest aspects of my role as the project manager was communicating with the surrounding, the neighbours and any buildings. The Abbey Theatre, which is on one side, which is just here. Anybody who's familiar with Dublin will know where the Abbey Theatre is. As I said, this is the VHI's current head office. That's their client. There's a Lewis line, the train line that runs up and down Abbey Street, just right in front of the site. And then each one of these are all individual businesses, and just out of shot there is Liberty Hall, which is just here, so everybody's familiar with where Liberty Hall is. So liaising with the Abbey Theatre, as I said, I used to have meetings with them during the initial phase when we were piling, and when the foundations were being dug. I used to meet with the Abbey Theatre once a week to understand their theatre times, when they were doing kind of sound plays, or when they were rehearsing, or when they were loading in, because obviously they didn't want people piling 5 meters away from their main stage when they're trying to rehearse for a show. So we were continuously meeting with them to understand what it was they were trying to do, and then work around that as best we could so that we didn't effectively tread on people's toes. Just-in-time deliveries were a massive thing for us, calling on the deliveries so that you didn't have rows of trucks showing up with facade panels that you didn't actually need. We didn't have anywhere to store it, so everything had to be called on when we needed it. And also a really handy tool that we used extensively was storyboards and letter drops for the surrounding buildings and businesses. We would do storyboards explaining to people exactly when a particular task was going to happen and how they were going to be impacted and how long they were going to be impacted for. And we found after a while, generally, if you communicate enough to people in the surrounding businesses, you're disarming them to a certain extent. They understand that you have to get a job to get on with, but as long as you keep telling them, then they're generally happy enough. So that's just, the picture just gives you a kind of indication there as to where the building, this is the new building that went up, and how tight everything was down there in that area. Health and safety considerations, as I said already, managing, there's a lot of planning with our own safety team that went into how you erect a steel structure like this. That was our hoarding line, and 3 meters in front of the hoarding line there was a train going up and down every 4 minutes, which is the Lewis. So there was huge considerations that went into any crane oversails, the impacts that we had, talking to Transport Ireland and talking to Transdev, and understanding what it was that their concerns were, and then trying to come up with ways to mitigate so to effectively allow us to get on with the job. Public interface as well, we were really, really close to the public. There's a lot of kind of unsociable behaviour down there in that part of town. A lot of people doing heroin in the back lane that we had used to kind of stepping over people. There was always incidences up and down the lane, so that was a big aspect of the job. And then, working on this leading edge here. So as the roof went up, at some point when the facade panels went on, the vertical facade panels, there was also a horizontal rain screen panel. So we had to completely remove the edge protection at one stage. And there would have been guys working along here strapped on harnesses. So if you were walking past on the footpath down here on the road and you would look up, what you might see is 3 or 4 guys up on the roof with absolutely no edge protection bar what they had onto their backs. So we ended up inviting the HSA down to site. We took the unusual step. The HSA their head office is not too far from where that site was. So we took the unusual step where we actually invited them around to the site, explained to them what we were going to do. These were the measures that we were going to have in place, and if they had anything to advice to give to us, then we were able to write them into the method statements. So we were happy that we weren't going to be effectively doorstep by them when they come down and potentially shut down the job. We invited them in and told them what we were going to do, and then they were very happy about what we were going to do. The actual restoration of the building itself, so it wasn't in a bad condition. The church itself, the stone on the outside was probably general to what you would see throughout a lot of the city. The stone was probably heavily carbonated. You see the black carbon that would have built up on a lot of the cane stone, and similarly around a lot of the door heads up around here. That all had to be cleaned off. There were specialists that came in and they washed down the whole building. And there was stone repairs, like you can see here. The cane stone, which is quite a brittle stone. There was stone grafts taken from other areas of the building, and they were regrafted into these areas. Repointing, there was extensive repointing as well throughout the building. We re-roofed both buildings, the church and the church hall next to it. Again, at the outset of the project, there wasn't supposed to be, I think there was an allowance in the bill to replace 40 tiles, and that was just due to some leaks that they could see inside the church. But when we got up a bit closer to the actual roof, it was badly degraded on one side, the slate coming from the west. On the east, it wasn't too bad, but the clients said, look, the building site at the moment, we may as well spend the money and re-roof both buildings. So we ended up re-insulating the church and the church hall and completely re-slated it. And that's what it looked like when it was cleaned up. So that is now the front entrance and the reception to the VHI. So if you're calling in as a member of the public, you go straight into the church, and that's their reception. When we took over, that's images of the inside of the church itself. It was effectively what you would think the church looks like. An organ, had an altar and had all the pews and the tiles, but it had been completely disused for about 20 years. And the VHI were using it effectively as a store. So structurally, their hands were tied structurally with what they could do because they had a conservation order on it. So what we ended up doing was we effectively removed everything from the inside. The organ was taken, they weren't allowed to scrap the organ, so it was taken by, I think it was a pub in Galway actually, and it might be a DJ booth somewhere around Galway maybe. It's where the organ ended up. And all the pews were sent into storage and kept. It's just another image in the inside. So that's effectively what it looked like when we took over. We had to take 1 meter of stone off the floor to bring it back up and to put services within the slab. There was a new slab poured. So again, something that we didn't probably think about at the beginning was how you remove 1 meter of stone from inside a building. So we ended up putting mini diggers inside the church itself and conveyor belts of stone running through either of the doors on the outside. Out through one of these doors, we ran conveyor belts and removed 1 meter of stone off the floor, completely grubbed up the floor, and then turned everything back around and imported all stone back in and poured a new floor. So something that we didn't give enough consideration to at the time, but we were quite happy with ourselves when we came up with the idea of using conveyor belts. And that's effectively what it looks like today. when it was handed over. So very, very modern, still, looks like a church, but a very modern building. VHI, that's where the customer service desk is, that's the reception desk is, and what they do, they have this screen that they installed. They can close down the area and use it for corporate events. They've watched rugby matches in there, and they can bring in catering. So it's really interesting space, and it's well worth checking out. On culture, in Dublin they do a cultural night once a year, and this was the first year that they opened up Scots Church, and they had 800 people in 4 hours into the building. There's a rose window. If I just go back one image there, up at the back there, just above the screen, was a key feature for the VHI. There's a rose window, is what they call it, which is effectively a stained glass window. And it was on the outside of the building, on the gable side, and obviously looked into the church, but it was in really poor condition. On the outside, the stone was very badly deteriorated, and the glass wasn't vivid in any way, so it needed a full restoration. So the whole window was removed, and it was sent to a company in Navan called Glasshouse. They came and they took it all out piece by piece, and they recatalogued it, took stencils, removed each piece individually, cleaned it by hand. There was 1,200 pieces in the window alone. Cleaned everything, re-leaded it, and that's a pretty clear image of what you see. From it, you can see kind of the way you have it stacked here into different parts. And that's a picture of the inside. So I'm standing looking at the extension of the new building, and you can see the rose window here on the right-hand side. So it's a real feature now. You can walk up and down the stairs on one side of the building, and when you're in the church, you can see shadows of people walking past on the other side. So it's a key feature for them, and it looks fantastic. The church hall itself then, which is the second building, the building which is in the belly of the main building. Again, when we got there, the building was being used as a store, had a false ceiling in it, so there was a 150-year-old timber roof that was completely concealed. It was then removed. So that was the way we found it when we got there. And we had to take off the roof to allow a scaffolding to be built, which was then going to build the rest of the structure. So piling, there was 220 mini piles. So this is in the process of when the guys were in piling inside the church. There was probably 60 piles maybe put into the church hall, all the way around. And that's an image of what it looks like today. There was part of the roof was removed on the right-hand side to allow these balconies to fly in, so you can stand on first floor. There's another image in a moment. So where we were downstairs, that whole roof was removed to allow a scaffolding go through it. Everything was catalogued. All the sarcasm boards were catalogued and numbered. The conservation architects made us do it. Take it away, store it, strip it, and then bring it back and refit it piece for piece. Exactly the way it was prior to that. So these balconies then, as you can see, are another feature when they just dip into the building. And again, that's what it looks like today. The balconies which are coming in from first floor, as I said, we removed part of the roof to allow those balconies to stick their nose into the building. And the VHI use it as what they call an innovation centre. But it's a pretty contemporary room for an old 150-year-old building. And again, this is the part of the roof that I was talking about, which was taken off, and these are now breakout little meeting spaces where people can sit, and those balconies jut into the side of the roof. And then up on the second floor level, you can see they have similar balconies which are hung using these Macaulay bars. So the whole first floor and second floor are hung from the third floor above by using those Macaulay bars to give this effect. So again, when you're standing there in that space and you see this building, this church structure within the belly of the other building, it's pretty striking and pretty impressive. It's a time-lapse video. Before I just start talking about the structure, I'll just show you a quick time-lapse video of the structure as it came up. So you can see the concrete core. First thing we did was bring up the concrete core, the lift shaft. The lift shaft took that up, and then we're starting to bring in steel. Scaffolds here starting to go up above the church hall. striking steel, exoskeleton steel. You can see it coming up bit by bit, being brought up on scaffolding. The roof, just to add an insult to injury, the roof slopes in two directions. Not only does it slope from east to west, but also north to south. You can see the slope on the roof there as it comes down. And now the facade is going on here. This is the facade at the back. It's a mix. The facade is a mix of stainless steel and glass. So each of these downward triangles are stainless steel panels, and the upper triangles are glass. All glass at the front. So now most of the structure is up now at that point, and the fit out is going on. You can see guys out on the roof. Roofing here. Tower crane is still up, so it's probably maybe 6 or 8 months still to go. Looks like someone's having a party inside there. And again, you can see stainless steel panels here on top of that roof, so the whole, it's like a stainless steel box, effectively. The outside, the external works are all being finished. They're being brought up. Tower crane is gone. Finishes are happening. Finishes are done outside here. That's almost it. So when you go past it at night time, then it's all different uplighters in each of the panels. In each of the facade panels has different uplighters. So on any given day, I think they have a range of 130 different colors that they can put into it. DHI's brand are purple, so generally it's lit purple. But on Paddy's Day it can be green, or Valentine's Day it can be red, or so they tend to change the colours at will. They have a little iPad where they can change the colour of the building. Just moving on, I'll just talk quickly about the steel structure. So again, it's concrete core formwork, as you saw in the video there, exoskeleton structure built entirely off tube and fit and scaffolding. So what we had to do was we brought because of the building that was beneath the main structure, that gave a lot of difficulty in how we were actually going to start on the 3rd floor, which was really the first office floor, because the 1st floor and 2nd floor were hung from the 3rd floors. 3rd floor was the first floor that we were going to have to do. So we ended up building a scaffolding, leveling it to exactly the level where these floor beams had to be landed, and then setting out the floor beams individually all the way along the floor beam, and then offering up the outside of the exoskeleton frame, which would then stabilize everything as it went up. So the first thing that we did was build the scaffolding. As I said, the deck beams went in, and then the outside steel went up, offered up out to it. That is a picture of the scaffolding above the church hall. So to take the weight of the steel beams that were done on the 3rd floor, that is what we had to do above the church to try and maintain that and stabilize the building as it went up. So you can only imagine what the temporary works cert looked like for that. And it's just another image of the scaffolding again outside, so built all the way up. So at some point we kind of got hemmed in program-wise with the scaffolding, because it was taking a long time for it to go up. So we came up with the idea of, rather than it being a ground-based scaffolding, which it was at the outset for the 3rd floor beams, was that once the building got up to a certain height of steel, we transferred the scaffolding actually onto the steel structure itself, which allowed us to put out the whole centre part here. So the scaffolding is now continuing on, but we're actually now using the steel itself to build the scaffolding off, rather than it being ground-based, and it allowed us to remove the inside of the scaffolding, which then obviously meant that we could start pouring floors, and guys could start actually working in there. So we took the erection of the steel at higher level off the critical path by doing that. And then again, on the reverse of that, because of the ground-based scaffolding underneath the 3rd floor, we had to hang the scaffolding from the 3rd floor, which you can just see here in this image, to allow us to actually start re-roofing that again. So it was a real scaffolder's nightmare. And then for tolerances in the steel, people asked us how, on the X, Y, and Z axis, how do we manage to maintain the accuracy in the diagrids? So the steel erectors ended up torquing the building from one side to the other to try and get everything in as closely as possible within tolerance. And from the ground up onto the 7th floor, there was 23 mil of an error, which is effectively zero for that kind of a building. As I said earlier on, looks at a mix of stainless steel and glass. The facade was brought in from Turkey. Everything was made in Istanbul and brought in that way, shipped in, just in time deliveries. That's an image of the outside of it, pretty cool looking. And again, you see the triangle is used extensively everywhere you look within the building. There's a triangle being used. And then lastly, I think there's a video. See the proximity of the train going past. Pause it there just before I finish. So you can see the whole west elevation, that's completely stainless steel. The whole roof is stainless steel. It was a rain screen, so there was still a felt and an insulated roof beneath it. But as you can imagine, all of these lot of buildings here belong to the Abbey Theatre, and to try and get access up to build that 7 stories with the build-up of panels, which is what the west elevation was really, really difficult to try and coordinate all of that and not to fall out with the neighbours at the same time. The VHI plan on being there for a long time to come, and instead, we'd like to be still friends with our neighbours by the end of this project, please. And similarly with this, the proximity of this building to that was a real challenge. So look, thank you for listening. Hope that was interesting.